Hello and welcome to today's edition of World Today. When the world is dancing to Trump's tunes, this one European leader spoke up in a display of strong leadership. French President Macron was in Washington, D.C. engaging U.S. President Donald Trump. This was the first time any European leader met President Trump since his second term started. But more importantly, it was the first time that any European leader came calling since the change in U.S. position on the Russia-Ukraine war, as it now leans more and more in favor of Russia. President Macron stood his ground, even interrupted and fact-checked President Trump on his war fund claims. Here's how.
French President Emmanuel Macron was the first European leader to meet US President Donald Trump since his 20th January inauguration. There was bonhomie and camaraderie.
He's a smart customer, I will tell you that. Sure. I just want to tell you a little story. So we were at the Eiffel Tower having dinner with your wonderful wife and with my wonderful wife, and we came out and he started speaking the French deal. And we didn't have an interpreter, and he was going on and on and on, and I was just nodding, yes, yes, yes. And he really sold me out, because I got back the next day and I read the papers. I said, that's not what we said. He's a smart customer, I will tell you that. Sure. Exactly what we agreed.
Verification of that truce, and then a peace agreement.
And there was a friendly banter where President Macron, with a smile on his lips, put the facts straight against what the US president said sitting in the Oval Office.
Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total efforts, and it was through, like the US, loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money, to be clear. We have 230 billion frozen assets in Europe, Russian assets, but this is not as a collateral of a loan, because this is not our belonging. So they are frozen. If at the end of the day, in the negotiation we will have with Russia, they're ready to give it to us, super. It will be loan at the end of the day, and Russia will have paid for that.
If you believe that, it's okay with me.
Mr. President,
but they get their money back, we don't, and now we do. But you know, that's only fair.
Mr. President,
Big day, and that we had a G7.
There were clear differences in their approach towards the Ukraine war and how it should end. But it was clear that Europe is not going to be mute spectator in a deal between Washington and the Kremlin over Kiev's future. French President Emmanuel Macron established it with elegance in his US visit.
Great job.
Thank you.
Bureau Report, India Today.
Well, the French and the US presidents met and discussed how to end the Russia-Ukraine war, and that too at the earliest. French President Macron openly hinted at a truce between the two nations, which could be coming in a matter of weeks now. Macron also asked Donald Trump to ensure security guarantees for the truce. US President Donald Trump reiterated his insistence to restore peace between Russia and Ukraine, and that Russia is open to European peacekeeping mission in Ukraine to facilitate the peace process. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, on the other hand, has asked America and Europe to come together to negotiate with Russia for a real peace deal. Zelensky said that it is Donald Trump who can help make peace through strength with the security guarantees.
I will be meeting with President Zelensky. In fact, he may come in this week or next week to sign the agreement, and which would be nice. I'd love to meet him. Would meet at the Oval Office. So the agreement's being worked on now. They're very close to a final deal. It'll be a deal with rare earths and various other things, and he would like to come, as I understand it, here to sign it, and that would be great with me. I think they then have to get it approved by their council or whoever might approve it, but I'm sure that will happen.
We want peace, and I think the initiative of President Trump is a very positive one. First, to have a truce. I think it could be done in the weeks to come.
From the very start of this war, we have wanted peace, and now more than ever we believe that real and lasting peace is possible if we stand together, of course. And it's essential that we work together so that when we negotiate with Russia, the strongest defenders of freedom are at the table, America, Europe and the Ukraine. And Ukraine, this is where a real peace deal can happen.
While the diplomatic engagements continued in Washington, D.C. and New York, the UN passed 2 resolutions concerning the Ukrainian crisis, one moved by Europe and Ukraine and the other by U.S. at the UN Security Council. The UNGA resolution got 93 votes in favor, 18 votes against and 65 abstentions. And for the first time since the war started, America sided with Russia and voted against the resolution, while India and China abstained.
24th February 2025 marked the 3rd anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The UN voted on a draft resolution by Ukraine that called for a de-escalation, an early cessation of hostilities and a peaceful resolution of the war. For the first time, the US voted with the Russians in an attempt to block the draft resolution, and that too twice. First, the US opposed a European-drafted resolution condemning Moscow's actions and supporting Ukraine's territorial integrity. America chose to vote the same way as Russia and other countries, including North Korea and Belarus, at the UN General Assembly. Then, the US drafted and voted for a resolution at the UN Security Council which called for an end to the conflict but contained no criticism of Russia. The Security Council passed the resolution, but 2 key US allies, the United Kingdom and France, abstained after their attempts to amend the wording were vetoed.
France n'a pas voté en faveur du projet de résolution.
France did not vote in favor of the draft resolution presented by US. Indeed, we are fully committed to peace in Ukraine. We call for comprehensive, just and lasting peace, and certainly not for capitulation of the victim.
Et certainement pas à la capitulation de l'agressé.
On the floor of the 193-member UN General Assembly on Monday, US diplomats pushed their limited resolution mourning the loss of life during the Russia-Ukraine conflict and calling for a swift end to it. The resolution was passed with the Europeans and the G7 minus the Americans, voting in favor of the draft resolution. India abstained along with China.
我现在将决议草案付诸表决，赞成 S/2025/112号文件所载决议草案的，请举手。
I shall put the draft resolution to the vote now. Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2025/112 please raise their hand? Those against? Abstentions?
反对的请举手。表决结果如下。
The result of the voting is as follows. 10 votes in favor, 0 against, 5 abstentions. The draft resolution has been adopted as Resolution 2774/2025.
第2774/2025号决议。
India's abstention is not a surprise, since it has abstained from the UN resolutions on Russia-Ukraine war in the past. India's voting was a manifestation of its diplomat tightrope walk with strategic partners on both sides. Bureau Report, India Today.
Now let's just break down this voting process at the UN for you. Assembly of UN advancing a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine was proposed by Ukraine and co-sponsored by a host of European countries. It was a 3-page document. The US tabled its own version alongside the first document, which was entitled Path to Peace. When it came to the vote, Ukraine's version passed by 93 votes to 18. The US voted against, alongside Russia, marking a major shift of its position on the conflict and previous votes. 65 countries, including India and China, abstained. At the Security Council, on the other hand, a vote was held on the United States resolution. There were attempts to add amendments supported by several Western European countries, referring to a full-scale invasion by Russia and Ukraine's territorial integrity, while Russia wanted to acknowledge the deeply rooted reasons for the conflict and lasting peace in Ukraine and in Russia. But the amendments were voted down. The resolution was passed without any changes by the 15-member council, 10 in favor, 0 against, and 5 abstentions. Out of the 5 permanent members, US sided with Russia yet again, and China voted in favor. The other 2 permanent members, that is UK and France, abstained. Now, to discuss more, I'm being joined by Ambassador Swane Freddy. He's the former ambassador of Denmark to India, has been watching very closely what's happening. Ambassador Freddy, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today. It is a big development, but is there a growing fear now in Europe that the Russia-Ukraine war, is indeed a European war and America will not support Europe?
Certainly, you will find people and you will find experts having that view that now Europe will have to deal with this war, unprovoked war on its own. And you see a lot of countries, including Denmark, which I belong to, really talking in that direction. We need to build up our own defense capabilities. And that is, of course, a reflection of the last couple of weeks, many different changes and developments. And a lot of people are talking about peace. And I also saw that President Macron was talking about peace. But do they really mean the same thing when they talk about peace? Obviously, President Trump has put everything up in the air, and nobody knows how it can land, how it will land, and can it land. And whatever comes out of it, I think we will see a lot of turbulence in the years ahead. So a tectonic shift has happened, and we have to deal with that, whether we like it or not. That's a reality.
Well, a tectonic shift indeed. The fact that we are not only looking at the Russia-Ukraine war where Trump is siding with Russia this time around, but also Denmark has had its own problems with the Trump administration. In such a scenario, Ambassador Freddy, where do you see the older alliances? Is America a reliable partner at all?
A lot of people are questioning whether U.S. will be a reliable partner in the future. Being a former diplomat, but also a very strong defender of the transatlantic ties, I think we have to do whatever we can in order to secure that U.S. is still playing an important, not to say a vital role in the transatlantic relationship, and thereby also securing that we have peace, stability in Europe. But it should not really hide the fact that Europe has to do even more. I think we have realized on our side that Europe has not done too much over too many years. And therefore, the wake-up call by President Trump has, let's say, ignited a development that has been unprecedented. So Europe has to take responsibility. And I feel that Europe is going to take a very strong responsibility, and I am also happy to see that Denmark has taken very important steps. And nobody can expect others to defend yourself. It's like the old thing when you come to an aircraft, the first thing you are told, if the pressure in the cabin is just falling away, then you have to put a mask on. And please help yourself first before you are helping others. And I think this kind of picture image is also applying to what we are seeing now. We have to help ourselves before we are expecting others to help us.
Well, that's right, Ambassador Freddy. The UN resolution and the votes are a clear pattern of what lies ahead. The next 4 years are going to be turbulent for you. But in such a scenario, is this war sustainable? Can Europe really sustain this war if America does not support it?
There are different views on it. I think what is important is that Europe is building up its defense capabilities, and you see a lot of initiatives, the European Commission, whatever different states are doing. My prime minister has just been to Norway today and so forth. So you see a lot of new things and developments that you might not even have thought about 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago. So Trump has really disrupted everything, and it's also good for us. It's good for each and every that we now have to take responsibility for our own security. And nobody can be spared in this context. You can't hide behind others. That goes for India, that goes for Denmark, that goes for Europe, but it also goes for US. You have to take responsibility. Put the mask on yourself first before you're helping others.
Right, Ambassador Freddie, thank you so much for joining us here on the network. It is a developing story. We hope to have you on the India perspective when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war as well, because a lot has changed. And it seems like India, for the next 4 years, is on the right side of history, so to say. Thank you so much for joining us here on the network.
You are most welcome. All the best. Dhanyavad.
All right. Now shifting focus to another big story. This is coming in from Pakistan. Pakistan is hosting the ICC Champions Trophy 2025. But under the shadow of high security tensions, intelligence reports have warned of a major terror threat with the Islamic State Khorasan province, that is the ISKP, a proscribed organization allegedly plotting to kidnap foreign nationals for ransom. Chinese and Arab visitors are said to be prime targets, with operatives already conducting surveillance at airports, ports, and residential areas. In response, Pakistani security forces have deployed over 12,000 personnel in key cities like Lahore and Rawalpindi. From elite police units to special rangers, authorities are leaving no stone unturned. Afghanistan's intelligence agency has also issued an alert on possible ISKP attacks, further intensifying fears. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump's administration carried out a job cut in the Federal Aviation Administration recently, but the government clarified that no one with a critical safety position has been fired. According to the union and former employees, some FAA jobs that were eliminated had direct roles in supporting safety inspectors and airport operations. This comes at a time when between January 20th and today, there have been 7 incidents of aviation accidents in the U.S. skies or involving U.S. airlines. Most of them involve fatal casualties. Here is a report.
A Delta Airlines flight returned to Atlanta soon after taking off on Monday morning, as crew members reported smoke inside the cockpit. The flight 876 took off from Atlanta Airport, was headed to South Carolina's Columbia before the crew reported a possible smoke in the cabin. The flight returned safely to Atlanta and all 94 passengers were evacuated. 2 days before, on Saturday, another Delta Airlines flight bound for Australia returned to Los Angeles International Airport after smoke was detected in the galley. This comes within a week of the Toronto crash landing of yet another Delta Airlines flight. On 17th February, the Delta Airlines flight from Minneapolis crashed, turned upside down and caught fire on the runway at Toronto, injuring 21 people.
At the time, there were 21 injured passengers, ranging from minor to critical but not life-threatening injuries. A total of 19 passengers went to the local hospitals, with 2 more going to hospitals in the time period after.
Delta Airlines is not the only one. In fact, since January 20th, there have been 4 other aviation major incidents in U.S. skies. January 29, a catastrophic mid-air crash over Washington, D.C. claimed 67 lives. January 31st, 7 people were killed after a medical transport plane crashed into a northeast Philadelphia neighborhood, setting multiple homes ablaze. February 6, a small commuter plane crashed in western Alaska on its way to the hub community of Nome. All 10 people on board died. February 10, a Learjet collision with a parked jet in Scottsdale resulted in 1 fatality. Most blame this recent spike in accidents in U.S. aviation on job cuts in the Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA. About 400 personnel were let go.
To be clear, the FAA has 46,000 employees, This was, I think, 352 employees. And the employees that were laid off were employed for less than a year. So these are not the highest skilled members of the FAA. Not only that, we exempted people who work in critical safety positions, like air traffic controllers, like inspectors. They were all exempt. And by the way, we're actually hiring more inspectors, more air traffic controllers. So we're building up those critical positions.
A recent survey conducted by the Associated Press, NORC Center for Public Affairs Research, found that most US adults continue to believe that air travel is generally safe. Americans' confidence in air transportation and the federal agencies tasked with maintaining air safety has slipped a little from last year. Bureau Report, India Today.
Let's take a look at World at a Glance, where we take you through all the international headlines that we couldn't focus on in this episode.
A question on foreign policy for the Congressman.
US government federal workers had to face confusion following conflicting advice over compliance with an Elon Musk-backed order to list their last week's work in an email or face termination. Just 48 hours after an email asking, "What did you do last week?" was sent, the office behind it clarified responses were voluntary, leaving agencies to decide their approach. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump weighed in that workers who did not comply with Musk's demand would be fired or sort of semi-fired. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that UK will increase its defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2027. The UK's defence spending is currently equal to 2.3% of GDP. While defence spending increases, Starmer says international aid spending will fall from 0.5% of national income to 0.3%. The announcement comes days before Starmer flies to the US. A US Coast Guard cutter crossing the Tasman Sea as part of maritime security cooperation with Australia and New Zealand knew Chinese naval ships were in the area but had no interaction with them. China's Navy held live fire exercises on February 21 and 22nd in international waters between Australia and New Zealand that Australian officials have described as unprecedented. Earlier, a spokesman for China's Ministry of National Defense had rapped Australia for making unfounded accusation against the Chinese Navy's lawful military exercises in sea waters of Australia. Russia's Foreign Ministry Sergei Lavrov landed in Tehran on Tuesday for talks with Iranian officials. This visit comes days after Moscow held initial talks with the US just a month after Donald Trump returned to the White House. Lavrov will discuss regional and bilateral topics with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi during his one-day trip to Iran. Starbucks announced that the company is laying off 1,100 corporate employees and eliminate hundreds of open roles as part of a broader effort to streamline its structure and improve operational efficiency. Starbucks CEO Brian Niccol said in a letter to employees that the company is simplifying its structure by shedding redundant roles and creating smaller, more nimble teams.
That's all in this edition of World Today. We'll be back same time tomorrow with all the latest updates from the world. Goodbye and take care.